So I'm just going to put my camera on the stand here. And then I haven't started on this at all. The only thing I've done is ironed a little bit of scraps because I'm going to make mine all out of scraps that I had in a scrap box. So I ironed some of the scraps so that I wouldn't have to do that all while I was talking to you guys. How is your Tuesday afternoon? I hope it's good. If you have any questions as I'm going along, go ahead and ask them. I might not see them for a second if I'm looking down cutting fabric or whatever, but I will do my best to answer them as we go here. So now you're staring at my iron. So here's the pattern. It's actually a really nicely formatted pattern. A really good friend of mine put this into a pattern for me. If you have a printer that will duplex, you can actually make this into a little pattern booklet. I do have that, but I think I hit the wrong setting when I did it. So anyway, I have it on 2 pages, but this is the front of the pattern, and this is the instructions and the last part of the instructions. So the reason that this says the fabric requirements are strips is we did this as a shop hop pattern. I actually made this pattern a long time ago for Riley Blake's blog, and I reformatted it for us to use it as a shop hop pattern when I had the brick and mortar store. And so I had to make it so that the stores could give out strips of fabric to the shop hoppers so that they could make the pattern, because this was our free pattern for that year. So you don't actually need 3.5-inch strips. What you do need is just scraps. You don't need specifically strips. They could just be squares or fat quarters or whatever you like. The only thing that you do need strips of are strips of red fabric, strips of white fabric for your stripes. But other than that, your blues, you can just use scraps. So I need 3.5-inch strips. I don't know if some of these fabrics might not be wide enough. We'll have to see. So I pulled out a bunch of different reds, and mine's going to be pretty country looking. I normally am more of a modern girl. I like to make modern quilts, but I'm making this out of Tilda Fabrics, and I'm not using too many solids, so it's going to look pretty country because I'm not using very much solid. But I don't mind. I think country for a 4th of July quilt is just fine, and so I don't mind that at all. So here's some of the reds that I picked out. And I think this one's not going to be wide enough, so I'm going to have to find another piece of that. I think I have another piece that's big enough. And I picked out some like low volume whites and creams to use for my stripes, for my white stripes. And again, I think this one's going to be too small, so I'm going to have to find another piece. But anyway, so I'm just going to start cutting the strips for that. And then I'll start cutting the pieces for the blue for the stars. The stars go together kind of like a mosaic. Instead of being in rows like you would make a quilt with rows of stars, these are like pieced together so that they fit together kind of more closely. If you look here in the pattern, you can see they're not actually put together in rows. They kind of share each other's space in there, so it's kind of fun like that. This is the modern part of the quilt. Putting together the stars like this, they're not in a grid. That's kind of a modern thing to do. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm going to get these together and see if they're big enough to cut. This one I know is not 3.5 inches. Nope, it's 3.25, darn it. Almost big enough, not quite. So you're not going to hear me talking very much because I'm going to be paying attention to my cutting. So if If you have any questions, just let me know. I need 4 red strips and 3 white strips. 1, 2. So I need 2 more red pieces. And this one's not big enough. Okay, so I'm going to go find some more red fabric to cut for my stripes. In the meantime, I will put this here so you can see what I'm doing. For some reason, I was thinking those were supposed to be 2.5-inch strips, but I guess I did 3.5. Let me look at this and see, make sure. Yep, 3.5. So, before I cut those pieces off the bolt, I'm going to go ahead and cut these ones. These have all been in a scrap basket, so they're a little raggedy on the edges. And I cut a lot of layers all at once, and I know some people don't do that, but you have to do what you feel comfortable with. If you do not feel like you can cut this many layers at once, I totally understand. Go ahead and do what you feel comfortable with. I'm comfortable with this. Usually up to about 5 layers I'm good, or 5 bolts, so that's about 10 layers. So there's some 3.5-inch strips, and I've got 2 whites and 2 reds, so I need 1 more white and 2 more reds. This one I'm going to have to trim the edge off of because it's a little crooked on one side. These are all bolt ends and things that I got from my scrap bin, so they're not necessarily perfectly straight on one side. I'll put this back on the bolt since there's a half a yard there. Okay, let's see, which ones did I do? Go do... So are you guys done with work today, or are you still at work? Or do you work from home, or you can just talk. It's okay. I always feel like I'm talking to myself. This is one of my favorite patterns. It's so easy to make that you can get it done in a day and have it ready for 4th of July. Just lickety split, super easy and fast. Trying to cut underneath where my phone is on the stand is kind of funny. Okay, I've got my 4 red ones. Now I need 2 more white ones. Or creams or something. Girls. Don't mind my dogs. Hush. It's just me. I have them locked out of here because I don't let them in my sewing room ever since they decided that chewing up the Aurifil thread was what they like to do best. I'm still here. I'm just looking for some more white fabric to use for my stripes. So give me just a couple seconds. I'll be right back. And I'll put the pattern back here so we know what we're doing again. Okay, we'll see if these ones work. This one might not because it's got a lot of pink in it. That might work. I think that one will be okay. It's hard to find the white background fabrics in my scraps because they're the most popular ones from Tilda, and they sell out really fast. So a lot of times I don't even have scraps left over from them. Let me see if there's enough on this one. Maybe. Either that or it just becomes my own half-yard piece. I like this one, so I'm going to cut this one. I only need one more. Maybe I'll just use this one so I don't have to ruin a half-yard. Now you see how I pick out fabrics. I tried to do this before I got on with you guys, but I thought that I needed 2.5-inch strips and I needed 3.5, so it didn't work out. A lot of times I have a lot of people who see this as a replay and don't see it while I'm actually talking. So if you are here watching a replay, if you could just say that you're here watching a replay, I would love to know that there were other people watching this. Now I'm ironing on the floor. Not literally on the floor, but my little mini ironing board is on the floor, so I'm bending down to iron this. And the iron's not exactly hot yet either, so. See how I have to stand to get that cut. Okay, so I think these are going to be my strips for my stripes. My strips for my stripes. So maybe this one on top, and then this one. This one. Yep, that looks pretty good. It'll be very different from my last one. My last one was done with cute little cutesy pink and turquoise. Now I need to get out my blue. So if you watch any of my last couple of videos, you would have seen that I am making the 100 Days, 100 Blocks Kinship Fusion Quilt-Along stuff for the Instagram Quilt-Along. And that's what I'm using these fabrics for. But I decided to make this little table runner. So I'm using some of the same fabrics. These should be pretty cute. Okay, so now we need to cut. Cut a strip off of this. So usually, if I have scraps like this, I'll just cut strips of whatever width the pieces need to be. And I usually try to go by the largest one first. That way, That way, no matter how much I use, I usually have a big enough piece left over to use for something else. I'm not very good at using scraps, I have to admit. If I've made something out of something once, it's usually that I'm done with it afterwards because I get bored easily. And so, most of the time, if I have scraps, they end up in a scrap bag or something, and I give them away or I throw them away. If they're too small to use, of course, I throw them away, but I usually give them away or something because I'm just not good at reusing my scraps. I know some people like to save every little tiny piece, and I think that's great. I wish I was one of those people, and I used to save all the pieces, and then it would end up that they would just end up in a pile somewhere and they would never get used anyway, and they cluttered my house, so I gave up on that and started just giving them away or whatever. So that's what I do now. So I needed 4 3.5-inch squares, which is what I just cut. And out of this fabric, I'm going to cut 4 2-inch squares and 4 2 3/8-inch squares. So I'm going to cut a strip from this that's 2 3/8, and then cut the 2-inch pieces out of that as well. You could just cut it 2.5 and use that as your pieces, and that would be fine too. You would just need to square up your blocks at the end because they won't come out exactly the right size. They'll be a little bit big. So these are 2 3/8, and I'm going to cut 4 2 3/8-inch pieces from that. Now you definitely don't have to cut these all from like one fabric. You could cut all of these squares from different blue fabrics, would be totally fine. I'm just doing it this way because it makes it faster for me. And I need to, let's see, 4 2-inch squares. It actually looks better if it's scrappier, so if you have more pieces, that's even better. I'm doing it because it's faster, and I'm doing it on camera, and I don't want you guys to have to sit there and watch me cut for the rest of the day. So I'm not going to make this entire thing on camera, but what I am going to do is get it started. There are, the way the stars go together, I have made it look like somewhat like blocks that you put together. So I'm going to make the first one, and then I'll come back tomorrow. You won't have to watch me cut fabric again. Tomorrow or the next day, I will come back and do the other blocks. Actually, I think what I'll do is just go ahead and do the stripes now. It's going to take a little while to cut all of the blue fabrics, and I don't want you to have to sit here and watch me cut fabric all day. So I'll go ahead and get those cut off camera. What I'm going to do is make the stripes to start with. Okay, so the top 3 need to cut them to 42. No, the bottom 3 I need to cut to 42 inches. And the top 3 I need to cut to 30.5 inches. So these are the bottom 3. These are the top 4. First I'm going to cut the selvages off of them. What I do when I'm going to cut selvages off is I line all of my fabrics up on a straight line on my mat, because sometimes the ends will be a little bit crazy because the selvage kind of shrinks your fabric up and it makes it go a little bit wavy on the edge. So if you're lining up your straight edge on a straight line, it helps to keep your end straight. Okay, now to cut these to 42 inches long, what I'm going to do is put all of the folds together on one end and measure from the fold to 21 inches, because that makes 42. 21 and 21 is 42. So I'm lining up the 21 on one end, and fabric is only between usually 44 to 45 inches wide. So you are going to need every last little tiny bit of your fabric. You can see over here, I think you can see over there. I'm going to end up only cutting off maybe 1/4 of an inch on each edge of this. So just trying to make sure you can see the end of that. I'm barely cutting anything off, so you want to make sure when you take your selvages off to leave everything but the very bare edge of your selvage, because otherwise you won't have 42 inches left to make your strips the right length. Oh, okay, got myself confused there. This is the top 4, so these actually need to be shorter. These need to be 30.5. So these are going to be 15.25 from the fold. And I just find it easier to do it this way. If you don't want to waste that little, so I'm going to end up with a bunch of 2 pieces of each of the fabrics on the end. It doesn't bother me because, as I said, I don't use my scraps anyway. But if you're worried about it and want your pieces to be longer on the end, you can measure from one end to the other on your cutting mat. Cutting mats are not as accurate as your ruler, but it's not the end of the world if you go ahead and use your mat to measure that. Or a couple of rulers, you can put them end to end if you want to measure it. This is just the way I do it because I'm lazy and I don't really care if I have a couple of little pieces left. Actually, I like having pieces this size left because they're a good size for making blocks with. So I don't worry about that at all. And now we're going to do these. And these are the ones that need to be 40 inches long, so 42 inches long, I should say. So these are the ones that we need to just barely take the end off of. Sorry, I keep hitting the camera because it's right in front of where my hand is. I usually take about 3/4 of an inch off of the selvage edges, which leaves me just barely enough to cut a 42-inch piece. There are some fabrics So these are Tilda Fabrics, and they are pretty much 44 inches wide. But there are some fabrics that are narrower. Riley Blake fabrics, for one, are usually only about 40, barely 42 inches wide. So you actually couldn't use those. Well, you could. You just have to cut an extra piece and piece it. But they're only 42 inches wide, including the selvage, so you couldn't actually use them very well for this. So you'd want to be careful that you had fabric that was at least 44 inches wide. Otherwise, you won't be able to take the selvages off and still get your 42-inch piece that you need for your strip. You could make your flag a little smaller, I guess. Wouldn't be the end of the world if it was an inch or two smaller. I just liked the way that this size came out as far as scale goes, so that's the reason that I did it that way. Okay, so these are all cut to size. So now what I'm going to do is sew them together. And sew these 3 strips together, and then I'm going to sew the 4 strips for the top part together, but not the 2 pieces after they're sewn. I'm not going to sew those together because the stars have to go. So first seam I will sew in one direction, and the second seam I will sew in the other direction. And the reason you do that is when you sew, your fabric will stretch a little bit. And what will end up happening if you sew this way and then this way is you'll end up with a curved line by the time you get to the end of your sewing. So what you want to do is sew in one direction when you're strip piecing. Anytime you're strip piecing, you always want to sew one strip in one direction, so the next one in the other direction. That way you keep your fabrics from shifting and you won't end up with a smiley face instead of a straight line, if that makes any sense. So that's what I'm going to do with these. And then the 4 for the top, I'll do the same thing. And then tomorrow, when we come back, I'll show you how to put some of the blocks together, either 1 or 2 of these star blocks. The way they go together is in chunks like this and like this, so they don't go together all as rows or anything. They're going to go together as quarters of a block. So that's what we're going to do, is put together 1 or 2 of these blocks tomorrow. It just takes too long for us to sew a whole quilt. I couldn't do that on a live video all at once. So we're going to do it in pieces. So this is the piece we were doing today. And if you get a chance to get your fabrics all ready to go, that would be great, and get it all started. You can put together your strips, 3 long strips and 4 short strips. All of the directions are in the pattern, and I've put the free pattern link right there in the comments so you can download it. And we will come back tomorrow and start on the next part. Okay, talk to you later. The stripes for the flag yesterday after I got off the video, and they're right here. So the bottom piece is 3 stripes, and the top piece is 4 stripes. The top piece is shorter than the bottom piece because the top piece will have the stars pieced onto the side of it. So those are my stripe pieces so far. So to make the free-pieced star points, we need our largest size squares of blue fabric. That's these ones for me. These are, I want to make sure I'm saying this right so I don't mess you guys up. These are 3.5 inch square pieces. You'll need those, and you'll also need your solid white pieces, the 2.5 by 4.5 inch rectangles. So I used some scraps again, so I've got some pieces that are a little stringy on the edges, but that's okay. So what we're going to do is, piecing these is a little different because this is not precision. We want these part of the block to come out 3.5 inches, which is what this square is. And you're going to take these larger rectangles and you're going to put them, so you'll make sure that it's covering the whole corner when you lay it down, and then flip it over so that if this was a 1/4 inch seam here and I flip it down, I just want to make sure that it's covering that whole corner because we're going to need that whole corner of that covered. So when you lay it on your piece of fabric, just make sure it's going over halfway on the bottom. Hi, Sally! Yay, I can see comments today. So what you want to make sure is that it's going over, sorry, my phone's moving. Okay. Make sure that it's going over halfway on the bottom of the square. And it doesn't matter where it lands over here because we want them to be a little, if you see the picture, you can see that these points are not the same. We want it to be a little off. It'll make the star look kind of sparkly. So make sure that it's just over the halfway point at the bottom, and it can be anywhere on this side. So your point could be low or high. You could put it exactly at halfway point on the bottom and all the way high on this block, and then you'd have a nice high point. Or you could put it over farther and down farther on the side, and you'd have a lower point. But whichever way works. And make sure, though, when you do it, that your seam is at least halfway on the bottom part of the block. And when you flip this over at a 1/4 inch, it's covering that whole corner on the bottom. Otherwise, you're not going to have enough fabric to cover to make your block the right size. So that's what you're going to need to do there. And so what I'm going to do is take you over to the sewing machine and take all 4 of these pieces, and we're going to get these 4 pieces sewn. Yeah, I'm actually going to sew on the camera today. And I'm going to flip this around while I walk over there because you really don't need to see this crazy looking room of mine. And I just got home. I been so busy this morning that I didn't have a chance to come on until now because I just walked in the house about half an hour ago. Okay. Then I had to get some lunch because I was starving. Hi, Michelle. North Carolina. All right. Okay. Flipping around, looking at my sewing machine. Okay. Oops. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on there, and that's not going to work very well. Okay. Actually, nah, I'm not going to use the 1/4. Well, okay, I'll use my 1/4 inch foot. So I have one of those 1/4 inch foots that feet, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, that has this little edge that goes along your fabric, and it makes it kind of a pain when you're trying to do your half square triangles or anything where you have to sew over 2 pieces of fabric because it just doesn't want to sew very well over that. But I'm going to use it just so we have a good seam allowance on these. I love these quick presto changeo feet that they have now where you can just pop them on because, man, back in the day when you had to take a screwdriver to it every time was not fun. Okay. So I'm just going to make sure that it covers the middle and the side, and make sure that when I sew it down, it's going to cover the corner. So it does. And I'm just going to sew right along the edge of the white fabric. Okay, next one. Is it hot where you guys are? It's only about, I think the car said it was 85 or something, 89 maybe today here, which is not too terrible. Okay, let's see if this will fit. Yep, just barely covers that corner, but it does cover it, so it's good. And usually what I do is I do the same corner on each block. That way it just makes it so that I remember what I'm doing every time. Maybe I'll make this one a little different, make it a little bit lower and smaller. Half the time I try to make them wonky and they all come out the same because I'm not making them, I'm not intentionally making them different sizes, so I'm trying to make this one a little bit smaller so it has a different size point in it. And I'll do the same thing with this one, make it a little bit lower. If you've never sewn an improv star like this, it's a little confusing because it's a little different from doing it the way we do it with other star blocks, because you end up with 2 points on each of these instead of just 1 point. Normally when you do this, you'll have just 1 point on a block, and you know what? I don't think I went far enough over on this one. Let's see. Oh, I did. Okay, good. It meant at least halfway, which is all that we need. So now I'm going to... so if you're not a new quilter, you already know all this stuff, but if you are a new quilter, then it might be something that you don't know. So normally when you make a star, each half square triangle is only 1 point, and you make a square, and that makes 1 point of each of the points of your star. But when you do improv stars like these ones, okay, you end up with 2 points on each square. Okay, so what I want to do is show you then what to do from here. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim this corner off right along the edge of the white fabric. And you can use a rotary cutter to do this. I just happen to have scissors sitting here, so they're fine. And then what we're going to do is we're going to press this down so that the... Oh, didn't turn on my iron. So give me a sec. Okay, I plugged in my iron, so I'm not going to press this yet. I'm going to wait for it to heat up. And while I do that, I'll finish cutting off the edges, the corners on these other pieces. So I'm just cutting right along that seam allowance that I just made. And I know this seems a little willy-nilly, and like some people are a little worried about doing this, but I promise you, as long as this piece is at least to the halfway mark on the bottom and is covering the edge, and when you open it up, it covers the corner, you're going to be good. That's why I always check it each time when I put it down that it's covering the corner. Hi, Diane. Where are you coming from? Or watching from, I should say. So I've just trimmed off the corners, and I'm going to press those open. This is still not quite hot, but it'll get there. So I'm pressing toward the darker side, which in this case is the background fabric. The white's going to end up being our stars, our points. And I'm ironing instead of pressing, but that's just the way I do, so sorry about that. Most people will tell you shouldn't move your iron around when you're pressing your blocks, but I do it. This iron does not get very hot or get things very flat, which is not a good thing, but the iron that I love I bought some really expensive lace that I thought for sure was cotton, and it turned out it was not cotton. Hi, Cherie. I'm assuming your name is Cherie, I hope, or Sherry. I'm not sure which, but looks like Cherie to me, so from Maine. So my iron, when I ironed that lace that I thought was cotton, got lace melted onto it, and I have not been able to get it off. I've used Mr. Clean eraser. I've done everything I can think of to try to get it off, and it will not come off. Okay. So now that we have these all pressed, what I'm going to do is, you can see still where the square is. I'm going to line that up with my square ruler, and we want this block to be 3.5 inches when it's finished. So I'm going to trim this. So I'm doing 3.5 here and 3.5 here, and that will make this a 3.5 inch square when I trim this off. Just be very careful when you are going this direction, and make sure that your fingers are out of the way and that you're along the edge of your ruler. Do not want anybody cutting their fingers. That would be terrible. So this is the first point on here, and the next thing we're going to do is put our second point on this side. You love quilting! We all love quilting! Yay! Oh, it is Sherry. Okay, well that'll be easy for me to remember. My best friend in high school's name was Sherry. So, lining it up at 3.5 on both sides, and being very careful when I trim it. So if you have never had a rotary cutter accident, I have. I almost cut off the entire tip of this finger. You can still see where the line is right there. That was about 5 years ago, and you can still see the line, and I still have no feeling in this side of my finger, but at least it didn't make me have to amputate my finger, so that's a good thing. So what happened was, and just this is a cautionary tale for any of you who use a rotary cutter on a regular basis. What I accidentally did was, as I was cutting, I didn't quite get the blade up against the edge of the ruler. Instead, I got it on top of the ruler. So as I was pushing and cutting, and I cut fast normally, it went straight across here and cut my finger. So be super careful that you have it. And now every time I do it, now I make sure that I'm butted up against the ruler. And when you're going across this way especially, because it's really easy to hop over the ruler and end up on top of the ruler, and that's not a good thing. Okay, so that's good. That's a completely different point from this other one. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So see how this is a low, short point, and this is a high point? So that's going to look really cool because it's going to be a big difference in those two. And this one, I just wanted to show you one thing real quick. This one is a little bit too long, actually. What I should have done is gone a little bit shorter on this one because it's going to cut this point off on this star. I don't mind because this is a wonky star and it doesn't really matter. It's also doesn't matter to me because I knew that that could happen, and that's kind of why I make them this way, because I want them to look a little strange. But normally if you wanted to have perfect points, you'd want to come down a little bit lower so that you didn't have this edge here. But it's not a big deal to me, and I don't mind it. What was the other thing I was going to say? I guess that's it on that. Okay. So let me go ahead and finish this one. And I'm going to double check the size of this because maybe I was a little off when I measured that one. Nope, I got it. It's good. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that that was the right size. Okay. So now that part's done. We're going to do the same thing again on the other side of those squares. So we're going to take our other rectangles and we want to make sure that they are covering the center again, just like this one is. Make sure that it'll cover that corner. So maybe about here. And go down. And you just want to make sure that you don't end up with a bunch of blue left over here in the middle because that'll look weird. So you want to make sure that they cross each other here in the center. And then again, just make sure that it covers the corner when you fold it down. Okay, so we'll go do those real quick. It was pretty painful. I mean, I went to the hospital and stuff with it. You know how you do when you are, and it was funny because it was right in the middle of me cutting everything for Black Friday. It was when I had the brick and mortar store. Yeah, Sherry, you can use clothes for quilting. It's best to use cotton. Other types of fabrics do not hold up as well. So you'll want to use cotton clothing if you want to use clothing for quilting, but they definitely did that back in the day. They would take all of their clothes and repurpose them for other things to make quilts. They also took just plain wool, not even batting, but wool and old pieces of blankets. If they had old wool blankets, they'd use them for batting. So many different things. They really repurposed everything back in the day. So yeah, that's where feed sack fabric came from. They would take their feed sacks and make quilts out of them. So you could definitely do that with clothes. I wouldn't use a knit because it would be stretchy. And I would definitely use cotton, not like a polyester or anything like that. Okay, so I'm just making sure that it's crossing. Can you see this? Okay, making sure you can see this. So make sure that it's crossing your other white part of your block. Anywhere it can cross there. And then make sure that when you fold it down, it's covering that corner again. So that looks good. And I have to turn it around this way to get my 1/4 inch. So are you a new quilter, Sherry, or have you been quilting for a while? You can definitely use jeans to make quilts. That's a whole nother subgenre. I know there's a bunch of people who are making quilts with jeans again. That used to be a big deal in the 70s. People loved to make quilts with jeans back in the 70s. And my friend Melissa Averinos actually won Best in Show at QuiltCon with her quilt made out of jeans, which I thought was really amazing. They were her brother's jeans, so it was pretty cool. And they would hold out wonderfully because, of course, denim is very, very sturdy, so they would hold up quite well. So we're not actually going to make the entire block today because these get pieced in together with the other stars to make the stars part of the Stars and Stripes. So we're going to make the points and then leave them separate. You're a 70s baby, then a denim quilt would definitely be the way to go, for sure. They used to make quilts out of, you know, all those fun polyester fabrics that they had in the 70s, like the animal prints and the paisleys and all that fun stuff. So you can do that. It's just they're not as, I don't know. I don't find them as aesthetically pleasing, but they could, you know, it could be a fun thing. The other thing is kantha quilts that you get from India are very much like a crazy quilt like they used to make back in the 70s too. So those are pretty cool. Oh, gotta cut these first. So now I'm just trimming off that other corner right along the seam allowance that I just made again. And I am checking them to make sure that they look right where they're crossing in the center and everything before I cut them, because once you cut them, you are done if you haven't done it right. So got to make sure they work before you cut them. So these look really crazy and like something that you've never seen when it comes to quilting when you get them to this point. But as you've seen already, once you trim them down, they look like points and then they look normal. Okay, so now all we have to do is make these back into 3.5-inch squares. Oh, I don't press it before I cut the corner off. I don't know why. I mean, you could do it either way. I just find it easier if it's not been pressed open first, because then I don't have to pull this back and then cut after it's already been pressed. That way it's still flat, so I cut it and then press it open. So you could do it either way. It doesn't really matter. This is just the way I happen to do it. I do open it up, though, as you saw, and make sure that it covers the corner and everything before I cut it. So and as soon as I get these trimmed, I will show you how they look. And a little crazy there. There we go. Away with the scraps. Okay, so here's our points. It doesn't look like much, right? Oh, where's my other? There it is. So this is what the star will look like. Once it's all pieced together with the other stars, that'll be the center. Well, it's not really a center. It's kind of off to the side, but somewhat like a center star. But as you can see, it's got 2 points on each of these squares instead of just 1 point like most of your other stars that you put together will have. So here and here and here and here, we will have friendship stars and a variable star that piece into this. So we're not putting this one together yet because it's actually going together. This will be a quarter of the block, this will be a quarter of the block, and this will be a quarter of the block, and then there'll be a big star here as well. So these don't get put together yet. So keep those to the side. And we'll start on the friendship stars. So what we need for these are the 1 7/8 inch squares, the white ones, and the blue ones. Now all of these have been marked diagonally across. These are 1 7/8. And what you're going to do is take each of the white squares and put them right sides together with the blue squares. So it's really easy to start with because we don't have to lay it out, make it look like anything to start with. All we're going to do is make the half square triangles to start with. So they're just going to go together like this. And the reason that I'm putting them together before I go over to the sewing machine is then it makes it a lot faster for me to chain piece them. So with these, what we're going to do is sew 1/4 inch on each side of the marked line. We're going to make 2 half square triangles out of each one of these. So these are they should come out exactly the right size. If you don't feel confident in your 1/4 inch seam allowance, it would be better to make these at 2 inches instead of 1 7/8, and then cut them down and trim them so that they come out perfect when you're done. But they should come out to 1 1/2 inch squares, half square triangles. Nope, not doing anything wrong, Sally. Just a different style. You can do it your way. You're an expert already. You know how to do this. I'm sitting here chain piecing and you guys are looking at my face. I'm sorry about that. No, funny. So did you see, sorry about that. Did I have it turned toward my face the entire time? Oh my goodness. Okay. So can you see the 1/4 inch foot is right here, and I've got it to this side of the line instead of on this side. I don't know if when it turned around or if I never turned it around when I got back over here. I'm sorry about that, you guys. What a dork. Okay, so it's just that I've put the 1/4 inch foot so that it's just on this side of the line, not on this side, because we want that to be a smaller seam allowance there. I'm fun anyway, even when I'm like giving you the too close up the nose look at my face. Oh my goodness. You just didn't need to see me that close up, I know, right? Okay, so I've got this big long chain of squares. And what I'm going to do is turn them around the other direction and start back down the other side. And this makes it even easier because you just keep right on going. Don't go crazy like I do. There we go. Sally, if you could possibly, I don't know if you're at your computer or if you can share it from your phone, but if you can share this to the Quilt Along group, share the video itself to the Quilt Along group, I would appreciate it. If not, I'll do it when I get done here. I meant to try to do that yesterday and I didn't get to do it until after I was done with the video. I was probably making funny faces too, wasn't I? Sticking my tongue out and Oh, I'm in California, Sherry. Sally's in Texas. Sally and I are best friends. She's in Texas, and I'm hoping to move to Texas pretty soon. Gotta talk my husband into retiring first. I'm in the Bay Area in California. Land of tons of traffic and lots of people. Okay, so all of our little half square triangles are done, and now I'm just gonna snip them apart right there on the marked line. I'm gonna turn it back toward my face, and remember to turn it back the next time so that you don't have to look at me and look up my nose and stuff, because that would be not fun for you anyway. I mean, you know, for me, obviously I didn't even notice. It is, what time is it? Let's see. What's my Fitbit say? It is 3 o'clock. Oh, shoot. My husband's just about to get on his phone call, so I'm probably going to have to wind up here. But I'm just going to snip these apart. And then tomorrow, when I come back, we'll start putting together our friendship stars and our variable star, because those will go really fast now that all of our half square triangles are done. Let me go ahead and cut one apart real quick so you can see. So there's our little half square triangle. And I'll press it real quick. And we'll see how we're doing on size. So like I said, if you're not super confident about your 1/4 inch seam, there we go. Perfect, perfect. 1.5 exactly. Then make these, instead of making them 1 7/8, make them 2 inches, and then you can cut them down and make them smaller and make them perfect. Let me show you one more thing. Just since I am doing this, I'm going to show you how you would square this up if it wasn't the right size. So say you make this bigger. At a 2 inch instead of the 1 7/8, you're going to want to square it up. So what you'll do is you'll take your square ruler, or all rulers actually have this. Have a 45-degree angle right here on the corner, one of your corners. You're going to take that 45-degree angle and put it right along the edge of your triangle, and then match up your 1.5 inch here and your 1.5 inch here, just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and trim off my corners since I'm doing this anyway. And you'll just go ahead and trim it up at 1.5, just like that. And then you do the same thing with the other side. So say this was off on one side, not off on the other. You could get it exactly perfectly square that way. Just like that. So now we have a perfect little 1.5 inch square. So that's the next part of what we're working on, and we'll come back tomorrow and make our blocks, and that will be fun. Tomorrow I'll have more time and I can actually spend it and finish getting those made up. So I will see you tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what time I'll be on tomorrow, but sometime in the afternoon again, I'm sure, just like I was today. Probably right around 2 o'clock. It seems to be that's when I can get on. So I hope to see you tomorrow, and you'll find the free pattern there in the comments if you need it. And until tomorrow, I hope you have a good evening. Bye. Okay, so I have 8 half square triangles here. Always keep your blade closed. And if you look at what you want to make sure you don't do is make all of your friendship stars go in opposite directions, and you want all your points to go the right way, because if they don't, they look a little strange. So this is how our stars are going to go. So what I'm going to do is look at this top one and make sure that my white is in the bottom right corner. And then on the next one, I make sure that the white is in the bottom right corner as compared to the center. So bottom right corner is compared to the center, and the bottom right corner is compared to the center. And now I'm not, oops, see, that one's not right. It's really easy to get these turned around. Okay, bottom right, there we go. And so right now, it's hard to see that this matches this. Yep, so. But once you add your center, and your outside squares, I'm going to put this one over here because I want to mix up the prints a little bit. I have more of the floral than I do of any of the other prints, so I'm going to go ahead and use a second one of those. So there's our little star block. Move this over a little so you can see it better. So I'm going to trim up all of those half square triangles. What I usually do is take one of my square rulers, if I'm at the cutting table when I'm doing this, and I lay out my blocks on my ruler. That way it's easy for me to carry it over to my sewing machine without the blocks getting all messed up. And I lay out each block one right on top of the other so that I never get my little points mixed up. Once, sorry, I'm trying to get this in the frame here. Once I have all these points figured out the way they're supposed to go, so that I don't get them mixed up, I just stack each one right on top of that one. So this one, I match it up to the one underneath it. Just like that. And then I'll add squares. And a center square. And then once it's all stacked up and ready to go, I take it over to the sewing machine. So that's what I'm going to do right now. You can watch on replay. So I'm going to point this a little bit over here so you can see. I've got my block all set out right here. And here, I'm going to move this a little bit so you can see it even better. There. So what I do is I just take that first row, I flip it over on top of itself, and usually if these were any bigger than 1.5 inches, I would put a pin in the end of this just to make sure that I keep that edge together, because when you start to sew, sometimes the fabric will shift a little bit and you'll end up with that point not staying together. But because this is such a small one, I'm just going to hold the end really tightly as I sew. And then the next thing I'll do is grab the next row. So I've done these two, now I'm doing these two, then I'll do these two. And then I'll start on the next block. And you'll see how these go together. If you've never done chain piecing, this is the easiest way and the fastest way to sew more than one block is by doing chain piecing this way. So now I'm working on the third row for this block. Okay, now here's the tricky part. We're not going to do the last bit. We're going to go back to the top row of the second block and do that. And the second row. And the third row. Okay, now what you need to remember is you don't want to flip this around. Make sure that you pull it straight down and you start back up at the top, the very first row of the first block. And then you start with the last column of the first block. So basically we're just sewing all the rows together of each of the blocks. Okay, now we'll go to the second. And just remember to keep them in order. Flip them over like you were closing a book. So I'm picking it straight up, flipping it over like I was closing a book, and putting it on the edge. Okay, now we start back up at the top again. Okay, so now they're all sewn together in rows. And what I'm going to do is, I know there's 3 rows in each block, so I'm going to cut between the first 3 and the last 3 rows, and that will give me my blocks. So if you open this up, you'll see that it's still held together all as one block with the threads that are in between. And I'm not going to cut those apart because it just keeps it nice and easy for me to keep those blocks together. And I'm going to go over and I'm going to press these, and I'll show you how that's all going to go together so that they fit nicely together when we're done. So we have nobody talking today. Okay, here we are. Move my ironing board back. So I only made 2 of these blocks. There's going to be 7 of them total when we're done. So the top row, I'm going to open up. This is just the way I do it. You can go with all of your seams in one direction, and then the next row, all your seams in the other direction. The way I like to do them, I don't know why, is the top row, the seams go out from the center, and the center row, the seams go in. It's the way I've always done it. I don't know why I do it that way, but it works really well for me. The seams tend to nestle very well that way. So what I've done is, and I'll show you as soon as I finish this. The seams on the top row go out toward the outside, and the seams on the center row go in toward the center. So see, these are out, and then these go into the middle. So that when I flip this down and put it together, those seams nestle nicely, just like little puzzle pieces going together. So can you see when you put these together? I'll try to pull this apart a little bit so you can see. So there's the seams, and you put them together just like that, and they fit together like a little puzzle piece. And then this side does the same thing. And then when I go to sew it, I'll put a pin in each side of the seam so that it holds the seam together. If you put a seam in, which a lot of people do, or taught that way, to put a pin right where the seam is, you actually end up pulling the seam apart and not having perfect points there. So what you want to do is nestle your seams together, put a pin here and a pin here. You take that pin out as you get to it, and that will still keep that seam perfectly together, so you'll have perfect points on that seam. There are a lot of people who now will press their seams to open instead of pressing them to the side. Quilters have always pressed their seams to the sides. And the reason that I still do that is that if you ever have a seam that pops, let me show you in a second. Let me go ahead and get these finished, and I'll show you what I mean. If you ever have a seam that pops, if the fabric comes apart, you're going to see the batting underneath. If you have opened this seam and pressed it open this way, the only thing that's holding that together is the thread of your sewing that goes down the center of that seam. So if I pull this apart, you'll be able to see. Can you see? You can see daylight through that. And if you put that down on batting and that seam pops, there's nothing under there but the batting. So that batting's going to come up through that hole. And that's not a good thing. If you have your seam press to the side and you pop that seam, there's fabric underneath there because you've pressed it to the side. So if this seam comes open, all you're going to see is the fabric that's underneath. And then you'll have something to mend it to. But if you have your seam flattened, you have no fabric underneath to fix that seam to if you end up having a hole in your seam. So I want to. Now, I am not the quilt police. You can press any way you like to, but I like to press to the side for that reason, that I will always have that little bit of fabric that I can mend my quilt to if I pop a seam. So that's the reason that I do it that way. But everybody has their different reasons for doing things, and I know a lot of people will say, oops, I just flipped that around and you're now looking at my ceiling. A lot of people will say that you should press open because it puts less wear on your seams because the seams don't stand up as much. I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. And as I said, if you end up popping a seam, you have nothing to mend it to underneath if you don't press to the side. So what I'm going to do is show you as I'm doing this. Okay. So I'm putting my seams together. And I match them all the way along, and then I kind of push them with my fingers, one on top and one on the bottom. Push them together like that. And I use very thin pins because makes it much easier to get them through all those thicknesses of fabric. I put one pin on one side of the seam and a pin on the other side of the seam. And then I do the same thing for the other side. I had already gotten these lined up when we were standing at the ironing board, but so just like that. And normally I'll put a pin in the end, but again, these are such small pieces that I can just hold it really easily. And don't sew over your pin. Also, I put my pins in the wrong direction. They should go this way, but my mother was left-handed. And so when she taught me to sew, she put the pins in from the left side, and I've just always done that my whole life. So don't do as I say, or do as I do as I say, and put your pins in from this side to make it easier for you to pull them out. So now I'm just going to hold this end since it's perfectly together. I'm just going to hold it really tight as I sew to the end there. Now I'm going to do this one. And maybe I'll put the pins in the way that you're supposed to do them from the right side, but maybe I won't. It'll be completely awkward for me because I always put them in from the left side, even though I'm right-handed. It does make it much easier to take them out too, to not have to reach across. So again, I'm just putting those two, butting the seams up against each other, putting a pin on either side of the seam. To hold it in place. Here's the first seam on each of the blocks, as you can see. Now I'm going to flip them around and do the other side of the seams. It's kind of hard to sew with a camera right in front of my face, but I try. I also can't really see what you guys are seeing because the camera's right in front. The holder that holds the camera is actually right in front of the screen. So I can kind of see what you can see. I can see around the edges, but I can't really see what the camera is pointed exactly at. So I think I'm getting this all on screen. Oops, look at that. I just sewed right over those pins. Don't do that. Again, do as I say, not as I do. Sometimes it's hard to remember all the things when I'm trying to videotape and sew at the same time. There's the running the camera, and then there's the running the machine, which is all different. Okay, so now I'm going to do the other side of this one, and then I can press them and we can have a reveal of what the blocks look like, and that'll be fun. I'm only making 2 of the blocks, but I think I'll be able to show you what the other parts of the stars will look like once I'm done with these blocks, so that you can finish putting together your table runner. As you see, I've done this all on video as I'm explaining, and it's still taken me less than 2 hours at this point. So it's a super fast project. Okay, now I'm not going to show you a preview until after we get them pressed. Going back over to the ironing board. Got my hair up because it's way too hot to have my hair down when I'm in front of these lights. I did that yesterday, and boy, was I hot. The studio lights are hot. Okay, let's see how cute they came out. These really are the cutest little friendship stars. I love them. See? Isn't it cute? Okay, so we have these 2 friendship stars done. And we have our points from the wonky star from yesterday. So the first section that we're going to put together is one of the pieces of the wonky star, or two of the pieces of the wonky star, and the center, and one friendship star. So this is going to be one section of your star part of your flag. Let me move this over so you can see it better. Just like that. So these are our wonky star parts from yesterday, and then this is the center part, and there's the friendship star that we made today. So these four pieces will go together. You'll sew this seam, and then the center seam. And that's the first section of the star, part of the flag. And then the other section, the second section that you can do to this point, will have 3 of these friendship stars. So just imagine we have 3 here because I only made 2. So there would be another friendship star here, and then this part of the wonky star. So there's a friendship star here, 2 friendship stars here, and this part of the wonky star. This is all on the pattern. These are the 2 parts that I'm showing you right now. And the next thing we need to do is the part that has, so it's basically the same, but it's flipped over. So you'll have 2 on the bottom, 1 here, and this one will go this way. But you'll be able to see that on the pattern here as well. So as long as all of your, see here's the 2 white points, and then you'll have 3 friendship stars. And then the next thing we'll do is make the very last quarter, which is this variable star, and we'll do that one tomorrow. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and put together the rest of these friendship stars, and I won't assemble the quarter of the block units until tomorrow so that you can see it all put together. We can put all of those little 4 sections together. Okay? So I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining. And if you come and you're watching on replay, please leave a comment. And if you have any questions, leave a comment with a question and I will be happy to answer. Thanks. Bye. Hi. I'm back and we're going to finish our stars for the Liberty Table Runner today. So hope you're ready to sew. Get your stuff together and we'll get started. I'm going to turn the camera around and get started right now. So I hope you got your friendship stars all sewn together yesterday after we did our video. And I am going to work on putting together the other parts of this. Let's see here. Here is, I'm putting in the link to the, link to the pattern in the comments. And hopefully if you make any comments, I'll be able to see them as I'm talking. I see that nobody's on right now, so probably won't have any comments for a while. Anyway, here are the blocks after I got them finished. All of my little blocks. So there should be 7 of them. And I have my phone plugged in, so I'm having a hard time moving this around here. So the next thing we're going to do is lay out our pieces. There they are. Okay. So if you look at your pattern, we're going to make these quarter block pieces of the star block. So here is the first, we're going to make this one first. So if you look at the 2 points, make sure your points are pointing up. That's these 2 points right here. Hey, if you're there, say something. I'd love to talk to you. So these are these 2 points right here are right here. And then we're going to put one of the friendship stars next to it. And then another of the 2 white points, but they're going to point this direction. And that's this piece right here. And then we need the centerpiece of the star. So this is 1 4-patch that's all going to get sewn together. Oh, sorry, I'm out of frame. Hold on just a sec. Let me move this over so you can see it. There we go. So this is a 4-patch that we're going to sew together. We'll sew together this, and then those 2 together, and that'll make that 4-patch. And then for this 4-patch, we need 2 friendship stars on the top. 1 here, and then one of our wonky patches goes here, but it goes the opposite direction of that one. So I'm stacking them on top of each other so that I can sew them as a I'm going to chain piece them. I'm going to put these on a piece of paper to carry them because I didn't bring my little ruler over here to put them on. So I'm going to put them like this, and now we're going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew them together. So I'll show you that as I do it. Carrying them on a piece of paper so that I don't get them mixed up. And put this in the holder. I haven't sewn anything yet today. I've been working on the new website and getting it all set up and ready to go. So hopefully I'll be able to have that up next week, my new website. I really love the way my website is now, but it does not have the function that I want it to have. So I'm hoping that I can fix that with the new website. I'm going to move this over so you guys can see what I'm doing. So these 2 blocks were here. I'm going to fold one over on top of the other, just like that. And now I'm going to pin my seams together so that they match up. So I'm matching seam to seam. And putting a pin on each side of the seam to hold it in place. You don't want to put a seam or put a pin right down the middle of the seam because that'll push your seams apart and then you won't have straight seams matching up. So I'm trying to see if you can see what I'm doing. No, I'll turn this a little bit. There we go. And of course you don't want to sew over your pins because that's bad for your needle. So I just sew right up to where the pin is, and then I take the pin out. Getting my ends together here. Okay, that that's the first part of that block. Now we'll do the bottom row. Oops. Well, and there I went and did something that I never do, forgot to pin these together. I was more worried about looking at the screen to see if anybody was commenting. So let me go ahead and get these pinned properly, because I really do want them to look nice. So, oh, haha, that's because there aren't any seams on this. Okay, well, I don't need to match anything on this because there's no seams to match. I think I'm discombobulated. My friend was telling me yesterday that that's such an old-fashioned word, but I use it all the time. Can't remember who she said it, and I was like, I use that word all the time. It's one of my favorite words. So normally I wouldn't have cut those two pieces apart. I was just trying to get that pinned, even though it didn't need pinning. So I always put a pin in the end of a piece, even if it's a small piece, because I want those ends to stay together. Because whenever you're sewing, the feed dogs on the sewing machine will actually push your fabric a little bit, and sometimes you could end up with your ends, even if your piece is the right size, you could end up with your end being off when you get to it if you haven't pinned the end. So, and I put a pin not right at the very beginning, but a little ways in so that I can get started first. If you put the pin up here, then your sewing machine foot runs into it and you have a hard time starting. So that's the reason I start the pins where I do. Hey, I'd love to see a comment if you're there watching, so if you could say something. I can't tell, I'm pretty sure I can see comments here, so hopefully if you say anything, I'll be able to see it. Now, normally if I was doing star points and sewing this, I would sew it this direction so that I could see where I need to sew across. But because these are free-pieced points, it's not going to have a perfect point there at the center, because it's not really supposed to. It's supposed to look a little different and not like it's perfect. So I'm not going to worry about where this goes as far as the seam goes. Hi, Brenda. Well, you absolutely should make a quilt if you want to make one. Why would you not? Have you not quilted before? So as you can see, these will go together into our little quarter piece. And these ones here. Now, I'm going to take these back over and iron them. Do you like to sew, Brenda? Oh, and you've made a quilt by hand? So I'm moving back over to my ironing board. Okay, I'm going to flip this back around. So you sewed a quilt all by hand? I have a bunch of quilting tutorials. Oh, that's sweet. I wish I'd have gotten to sew with my grandmas, but I never did. I have a bunch of beginning quilting tutorials on my blog if you're interested in watching those. They'll teach you how to make a quilt if you like. Hi, Sally. You home from your cello playing? So Brenda, over on my blog, and actually if you want to join my quilt along group, I have the links in there to the free quilt along that I did last year that is all to teach you how to make your first quilt. It teaches you all the basics. If you'd like to do that, you can do that. Be happy to have you. Oh, that's nice, Sally. I didn't want to call it a gig. I thought that was a strange thing to call a funeral. Okay, so here is this quarter. As you can see, these are the 4 pieces there in the pattern. This is a free pattern, Brenda. You can find it there in the comments if you're interested. And I've got videos making this entire pattern, so the last couple of days I've been doing a video each day. Okay, so now I'm going to take these back over to the sewing machine and sew that last seam for each of these 2 quarters. See, we have a few more people on. If anybody wants to say hi. I am putting together a table runner / banner for a 4th of July project. So it's actually Stars and Stripes. If you're interested, there is a link in the comments to the free pattern. So what I've done is pressed these center seams in opposite directions so that I can match them up and get them all nestled nice and securely together there in the center. See the seams? And they go right together. Then I'm putting a pin on each side of the seam so that it holds them in place. And then one at the end, so that they don't end up getting pulled apart. And then I just hold the beginning part together like this. Hopefully you can see the sewing machine. It's kind of hard to sew with the phone right in front of my face, but whoops, I just did what I said not to do and sewed over those pins. I think I'm having one of those days, girls. When I looked down, I was still in the computer room working on the website. I looked down and found out that I was 45 minutes late to start this video. I got a little discombobulated. I'm using my discombobulated word again. I'm doing the same thing with this, nestling the seams right in the center, putting pins in each side. One in the end. So are you done for the day, Sally? Are you sewing now? Or you have something else you got to do? So here is 1/4 of our piece. And here's another 1/4. And these are going to go together like this to make part of our block. Oh, real traffic. Yeah, I don't know anything about real traffic. There's no traffic in the Bay Area, right, everybody? I know Houston's bad too. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is put together the variable star. So we haven't made any of that part yet. So you should have these squares, which are 2.5 inches. And, or what are they, 2 3/8? Now I'm going to have to look again. They are 2 3/8. So these are going to be our half square triangles for making the variable star block. So as you can see, I've already marked these across. This will be in the other video that I did 2 days ago. So it's called a variable star. Thanks for the question, Sally. It's called a variable star because a lot of times the center square, because you have a nice large center square, which is this square, the center square, people will make a different block to put in the center. So they called it a variable star because sometimes the center would have a pinwheel or another star or some other kind of block in the center of the star. And a lot of the different stars that are named for the states are variable stars with a different center in them. And that's why it's called the variable star. Learned something new today. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 2 3/8 inch white squares and put them right sides together with our 2 3/8 blue squares. And I'm going to take these over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew a scant 1/4 inch down each side of, can you see that? A scant 1/4 inch down each side of that center mark so that we can make our half square triangles. 2 things, always pin. You're so funny. For all you all who don't know Sally, Sally does not like to pin. So I could tell her all day long that she needs to pin, but that doesn't mean she's going to do it. But as I always say, learn it the right way and then break the rules as you wish, because I'm not the quilt police. So go ahead and break the rules if you want to. Or they're only my rules anyway. They don't really count. Okay, so hopefully you can see my sewing machine. Please let me know that you can see my sewing machine. Once in a while you break the rules. So I'm going to show you again. I've done this before, but I'm going to show you. This is my 1/4 inch foot, and it's got a little edge on it so that the fabric can butt up against that edge. But because I'm sewing across this, it's not going to do that. It's going to go across the top of my fabric. But what I want it to do is go right along the other edge of the line, not the inside, but the outside, because I want this to be a very small 1/4 inch, which means it's not going to be quite a 1/4 inch. And the reason I want to do that is so that I can square up my blocks and make them perfect after I sew them. So it's going just to the opposite side of this line. And I'm going to sew straight down that line, just like that. And start on the next one. So I do everything chain pieced because it makes it a lot faster than cutting in between. Besides, you save a lot of thread this way. And if you have one of those machines that likes to eat the thread as you try to take off, this saves you on that as well. Okay, so all of those are done on one side. And now I'm going to take them out and I'm going to flip them around and I'm going to do the other side. The free pattern is in the comments. It's the first comment. So if you're looking for the pattern for this, it's there. And I've made videos all this week, so you can find those in my video section on the page if you need them to put together the project. Okay. So as you can see, I've sewn a seam down either side of that marked line that's down the diagonal center of this block. And you just got to see my ceiling. So now, let's cut these apart. And I'm going to cut straight down that marked line on each of these. You can use a rotary cutter to do this as well, but I just find it faster to do it with scissors, so that's what I do. And I'm going to press these all towards the dark side. Because of Darth Vader, exactly. We pressed to the dark side. Sorry about that. I didn't see that until just now. And I'm being awfully quiet, I know. Sorry about that. Hold on just a second. I'm going to go get my square ruler. So these blocks need to be squared up to, or these half square triangles, I should say, need to be squared up to 2 inches even. So if you've never squared up a block, you put your diagonal 45-degree angle from corner to corner. And in this case, because it's a half square triangle, you could take that diagonal and put it right along the half square triangle. Make sure that everything fits within your 2 inches. And this will make them all nice and perfect, so that they fit together nicely when you sew them together. I also have another ruler that works great for this if you can get one. They're awesome. They're called a block lock ruler. They're great for trimming up your half square triangles. But I haven't pulled mine out today, so we're just using a regular square ruler, which I think works pretty good too. Whoops, am I off the screen again? I'll move it, hold on, so that you can see better. There we go. Trimming is my least favorite thing to do, but I know that they'll come out so much nicer once they're done, so I'm doing it, even though I hate it. Is it good that we're doing this all at the same time together, or should I be doing this off camera? What do you guys think? I don't know the dragon one, Sally. Tell me more. I like the block locks because they match up to your seam, and then they keep it really straight when you're trimming, so you don't have a problem of it moving on you. Not too much more to do here. Almost done. 3 more. You don't have to go look them up. I was just wondering, since you mentioned it. These are going to be so pretty. Did you get classes at QuiltCon? Hey, if anybody else wants to talk, we would love to hear from you. And if you're quilters, tell me whether or not you're going to QuiltCon. Even if you're not quilters, tell me whether or not you're going to QuiltCon. QuiltCon is a quilt convention for modern quilters. And next year it is going to be in Austin, Texas in February. So I might have to go look at houses, not couches. I read your sitting on the couch comment again. Okay, we're all ready to go now. So these are going to be our variable stars. So I'm going to lay it out on my ruler so that I can carry it over to my sewing machine easily. I always have to remember, make flying geese. So these are a strange size because normally these would be an even size block, but it is an uneven size block. So normally these would be like 2.5 inches, but they're only 2 inches. So that's a little different from what you normally do. There's a 3.5 inch square in the center. And there's 2 inch pieces around the corners. Just like that. Because I wanted to make these with the friendship stars, which are divisible by 3, because 1, 2, 3, they're divisible by 3, I had to make this block a strange size. So normally this would have been an even number, like an 8, but this is going to turn out an 8 or a 10, something, but this one will turn out 6, I think. Yeah, 6. Scooch my phone over. I know, because you can't see it, huh? Look, there you go. How's that? Now you can see it. So these are 2 inch squares. These are 2 inch. This is a 3.5. So when it all gets sewn together, it'll all fit. It's hard to keep my phone right in a place where y'all can see everything I'm doing. There we go. Now I think you can see kind of what I'm doing here. So I'm going to point it a little bit this way. I'm going to take and put this row together up here, put these all together. This one has to go together a little differently, but actually, I think I'll do it this way instead. Oh, my phone says it has low power. I'm going to do these two first and sew it to this so that then I can just do these rows and then put all the rows together. So I'm matching up my seams. So I put one over here that's not going to get anywhere near where my seam is actually going to be. And then I put one in this side to hold it. And try to make sure that I don't flip my seams over when I'm doing it. That looks pretty good. I'm just going to go press these really quick and then I'll be right back. Okay. So now start putting these together this way. Since nothing has to match up on this, I don't need to pin it. Putting a pin in the end on this one since nothing has to match. There's no matching seams or anything. Now, what I'm going to do is sew it from this side actually, because there is a point that I want to make sure I don't go over and make a mess out of. So if you see right here, let me hold this up. Right here where there's a little V where these two seams come together, I want to be able to sew right over that point so that I have a perfect point on the other side. So I go really slow when I get to that point and make sure that I'm sewing just right over that apex of the point of the star, right there. And do the bottom row. Little bits of threads here and there. Okay. Now I'm going back up to the top, doing the next piece, matching up, seam, and my stomach's growling. Can you hear it? Whoops, I sewed over this pin again. I hate that when I do that. Taking this apart. So now this I'm going to flip over again like this so that I can see it and sew perfectly over the point again. And I wanted to show you that, as you can see, I got right there where the point's supposed to be. So came out really good. So I want to do the same thing on this side. There aren't any seams to match up, so I'm just putting a pin in the beginning and the end on this one. And you can see right there where this needs to be sewn, right there on that V. Matching up my seams. The reason I lift up my my foot to put this under is there's a lot of seams right there at the end, and I want to put it over the top so that it doesn't push it and make a big knot on the bottom of the fabric. And I'm definitely being naughty and sewing over all of my pins today. I don't know what my problem is. But I haven't broken a needle yet, so I guess I'm okay. Last little bit before we go and press. Okay, now we'll go back and iron this. You get to see my mess. Doing a lot today. So I'm going to press this the same way I pressed my friendship stars, if you watched that yesterday. Pressing those two outside pieces away from the center. The center I'm just pressing to either side. It doesn't really make any difference. Pressing the center part toward the center. Sorry that the camera keeps moving. I keep hitting it with my elbow. Okay, so now we just have to put these 3 rows for this block together. Then we'll be ready to put together the rest of the stars block. So I'm matching up my seams again, nestling the seams together. I know, same thing over and over again, huh? That is kind of the story of quilting. The exciting part is once you've got it all sewn, opening up the block and looking at it and seeing how pretty it came out. That's the best part. And again, I've got my point on top so that I can go right over the apex of that point so I don't cut my point off. See how I did on that since I had to do it from a long ways away. It's hard to have a camera right in front of my face when I'm trying to do this. Hey, it came out good. The points are good. Yay. Okay, last piece. Nesting my seams. Better get my phone over there and plug it in before I lose power. Oh, whoops. Okay. There we go. Came out all cute. Is this weird that you're not seeing my face at all? I was turning it back and forth, but sometimes I think, you know, maybe they just want to see what I'm sewing. Okay, so that star's done. Now we need to put together the quarter that has that star in it. And the last quarter. So that was that star. Have to remember how this goes together here, just like this. Okay. So these two pieces go together. This star goes in this on this side, and then this is the last quarter that I need to put together. So the points for the star go up. No, is that right? Hold on. Oh, goes this way. That one goes there. This one goes here. And this one goes here. There. That's better. Okay, so I just need to put together this quarter, which is just like I did these other ones. And then we can sew all of the 4 pieces together. So we're going back to the sewing machine. Should have done this 3rd one when I did the first 2. When I first started, I thought I would just do those 2 pieces and then do the other 2 tomorrow, but heck, why not? We'll go ahead and get this whole star section done today. And then tomorrow, all we'll have to do is put together the strips that make the stripes and the star piece, and the whole thing will be finished. And then I can give you some ideas about quilting and finishing. So as you can see, this is a super easy, fast project. I've done it all on video. So it didn't take too terribly long. Oh, shoot. My machine just came unthreaded. This machine does that every once in a while. Let's try to get that back started again. There we go. Trying to make sure I'm sewing these the right direction. I'm almost out of power on my phone. Okay, I think I've got this right. Now I need to go plug in, otherwise you guys are going to lose me. Okay, let's see. Do I have this right? Yes, I do. Good. So since my phone is just about to die, I am going to go ahead and sign off. But I just wanted to show you, because I'm sure you all can put 4 pieces together, right? So here is the 4 pieces that all get sewn together. So this will be a block, and then these 2 blocks, and then you put these with those. And that will be our star section for our flag. And so put those 4 pieces together if you're sewing along with me. And then tomorrow when we come back, we'll put the stripes on and we'll have our flag finished. And then I will talk about how you can quilt it easily. If you're a new quilter and have never quilted before, you can do it with some straight line quilting, which will make it easy for you to do. And, oh, you're watching from Brazil. Hi, Johanna. How are you? I didn't see your comment come up. I'm sorry about that. So I will show you some easy ways to quilt it if you haven't quilted before. Things that you don't have to do free motion or whatever. So we'll do some straight line quilting. If you already know how to do quilting, then you can do it however you like to do. But just thought I'd show you an easy way to finish it up since 4th of July is coming up in just a few days. So, okay. See you in, I'll see you tomorrow. And thanks for watching. Bye. Good Saturday morning. How are you doing? So this is our last video for the Liberty table runner that we're making, or banner, or whatever you want to use it for. Hanger for the wall. Really happy with the way my stars came out. Didn't have to even trim the edges. They all came out nice and square. So I'm going to turn the camera around so you can see. So here it is. I don't know why I'm getting darkness here, but so I really like the way the stars came out. I haven't trimmed any edges or anything, and it all came out nice and straight and really good. So really happy with it. So what I'm going to do is show you what we're going to do next here. We put together our stripes already in the first video, and then the last 2 videos we've been working on the stars. So this is our stars all done. Getting my phone on a stand here so I can do this. Okay. So our stripe sections, we have one that's 4 stripes and one that's 3 stripes. So the 4 stripe section is going to line up with the edge of your stars, just like this. And we're going to sew that seam. So that's the first thing we're going to do. And then when that is done, your 3 stripes for the bottom will go on to that, and they will, all the edges will match up that way. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is upside down. I'm like, why are we not red, white, red, white? Here we go. Goes this way. Glad I noticed that before I went to sew it. So I'm going to go ahead and sew this first seam, and I'll take you over there with me while I do that. And then, and I'll put in the free pattern here in the comments right now. There we go. So anyway, we'll go over. There's nobody on at the moment on my live, so nobody to talk. But if you come on, I would love to hear how your Saturday is going. Oh, I need to get my stand, my holder for my phone. I have 2 of them, and I had one in front of my machine, but I was helping somebody out yesterday, and I needed it in the other room, so I'll just move this one with me. Hold on just a sec. You can look at my phone holder there while I get it on the table. This is a much smaller table than the one on the other side of the room. Okay, flip this around. There we go. Now you can see the sewing machine. So this has been a good exercise for me. I have not been doing a lot of sewing the last few months, and it's been good to sew every day, so I'm glad that I had this project to make with you guys. So I'm putting the two edges, the red and white stripes with the stars, and I'm going to go ahead and pin those. Actually, I'm going to flip this over because I want the star side to be on top like this so that I can see where my points are, so that I can match those up nicely and not have my points cut off when I sew them. I know it's Saturday morning, and I have been coming on at about 2 in the afternoon, so nobody was actually expecting me to be on this early, not even me, but got going early this morning, so here I am sewing early in the morning. My husband and I are going to work on like cleaning out or decluttering today, so I thought I better get this done quickly so that we could get to work on that, since it was my idea. So I'm just pinning these. I'm going to turn this a little bit so you can see. I pinned on either end, and I pinned in the center, and I'm going to pin just probably one more pin in the middle. Any place where your seams are going to match up, even though they're not stars or something that's going to be really obvious, it's always best to go ahead and match those seams and nestle them if you can. It'll just make your quilt look a lot neater and nicer, and it'll make it prettier. It's not super necessary, but if you can, I say go for it. Why not make it look nicer, right? So I'm nestling the seams. So I just have a few pins in it so it stays nice and straight. If you have the option to have your needle end in the down position, it's always best to do that when you're quilting or piecing anything, because that way you can move things around like this without them getting, or without the needle moving around. So since I'm going over where the point is on this star, I'm going very slow again, just like I did when I put the stars together, and making sure that I go right over that point so that I don't cut the point off or make it too wide there. So each spot where I have a star point, I'm going to be really careful to sew just in the right spot there so that I have my points right. If you're here watching, or you're watching on replay, I would love to see you comment. And if you have any questions and I'm not live when you ask them, I will be sure to answer them later on when I see them. So this is going to be a much shorter video because there wasn't a lot to finish up today. But I wanted to give you time to get your stars all done yesterday. So as you can see, the stars are sewn to the stripes. There's still a pin there, I can see it. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to move back over to the table and press this, and then put the bottom stripe part on, and then we'll have our flag all ready to go. Oops, I forgot. Gotta take this with me. Sorry about that. Let me flip this around so you guys can see me. See, there I am. Just have my hair up today because it's Saturday and I know we're going to be doing a lot of work in the house, so. I have my whole shop in my living room since I moved home from the brick and mortar. Okay, I'm going to flip around again. There we go. So it's kind of a mess in here because there's a lot of stuff. So there you can see the stars are put together with the stripes. I'm going to press this. Usually works out best to press away from where you have the most of your piecing. So I'm pressing away from the stars just because there's more bulk where all of those seams come together. Okay, so that is all pressed. Now I'm going to take my bottom 3 stripes, because this flag only has 7 stripes in it, and 9 stars. So here's my bottom set of stripes, and these are going to go here at the bottom. So what I do when I pin long strips like this is I pin one end, then I pin the other end, then I pin the center of the quilt, and then I pin in between. That way it keeps your stripes from getting crooked. They will get kind of roughly looking if you don't pin them in that way, because they will stretch as you're sewing. So you want to pin the right and the left edges first, then the center, then pin in the center of those spots to keep it from getting roughly. So I'm going to get my pin cushion and start pinning this. Actually, I have 3 pin cushions on this table, but they're buried under fabric right now. So first thing I'm going to do is pin this side. Get the edges together. Then I'll pin the other side. And then I'll pin in the center. It doesn't have to be the perfect center, but it should be close to the center anyway. It doesn't have to be perfect. So I'm pinning the center. And then I'll look at the center between the end and the center, so in between those two. And I'll do another pin, and then another one between the end and that pin. And then between the center and the second pin, and I just keep doing the same thing all the way across. Because I don't want it to get ruffly. Okay, now it's ready to go. I'm going to go back over to the sewing machine. Have to move that other phone holder back in here so I don't have to keep moving the one on my table. So as soon as I'm done sewing this, I'm going to give you some ideas about how to quilt this. If you've never quilted anything before, something that's easy for anybody to do. My favorite way to do straight line quilting. So I actually put the pins on the opposite side of the way I wanted to sew this, so I'm flipping them around. So I want to sew this with the stars on top so that I can do my perfect points. Sometimes I want to be lazy and not pin things or not worry about trimming my squares, and then when I do it and I do it the right way and they come out so nice the way the stars came out this time, then I remember why I do it the way I do it, because it's really nice when you can have a whole huge block with tons and tons of pieces in it and not have to trim it because it came out so nicely because you did it the right way to begin with. So the boring part of watching me sew is almost over. So I'm just checking every once in a while to make sure that I'm right along the edge because I can't see the bottom. I'm pulling the pin out just as I get to it with my sewing machine. Sometimes this machine seems so loud to me, but then I remember how loud my Juki is. It's not so bad. Okay, all finished. to move the camera back over. We're going. Okay. The light's a lot better over here. That's one good thing. So there it is. And I'm going to press it, and then I will take the phone off of the holder and hold it up so you can see the whole thing all put together. Okay. Move this over a little bit. Okay, let's see. I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see the whole thing. Can you see it? So Facebook's giving me a hard time because I rotated my phone. So anyway, this is the whole thing all put together. Now I'm going to show you how I mark, an easy way to mark it to quilt. If you have never quilted with your machine before, it's not that hard. So of course what you do is lay down a flat piece of fabric that is a few inches wider all the way around than your quilt. And then batting on top of that, and then your quilt on top of that, and then you quilt the three pieces together. What I use to mark my straight lines when I do straight line quilting is painter's tape. This is 1.5 inch painter's tape, and it makes a great grid on your quilt. And I like to do a diagonal. So hold on just a second. Let me move my ironing board out of the way so we have a flat surface. And make sure I get this in the picture. Okay. So this is my quilting ruler. I use my 45-degree angle on my quilting ruler. So there's one going this way and one going this way. I'm going to use this one. And what I'm going to do is lay it on the quilt. Just like this. And slide it over. And what I'm going to do is measure approximately, it doesn't have to be perfect, 2 inches to 1.5 to 2 inches in on the corner of the quilt. And I'm matching up that 45-degree angle right here on my ruler so that I have a straight edge going 45 degrees across my quilt. Now this is after I've already basted it together with the backing and the batting. But I'm just showing you this for so I can show you how I mark for quilting. So I've got the 45-degree angle here going across the bottom of the quilt. This is the straight edge of the ruler. And I'm using a 1.5 inch painter's tape. And I just put that on there. And it's reusable. So what I do is I'll put one strip down, and then I'll use my ruler and measure, because it's 1.5 inch tape. If you have 2-inch tape, use 2 inches on your ruler, but it's 1.5, so I'm using the 1.5 inch line on my ruler. And I'll take another piece of tape and mark it there, right along the edge of the ruler. Just like that. And then I measure over another 1.5 inches. And I put down the next strip. So I'm not going to show you that. But once I have it all the way across the whole quilt, I sew down each side. So this side and this side of the tape. That side and that side, and that side and that side. And that creates a 1.5 inch diagonal line all the way across the quilt. And then when I'm done with that, I flip the ruler this direction. So it's 45 degrees going this direction. And I do the same thing. I put the tape going that direction. So on each side. And you end up with a really beautiful crosshatch pattern for quilting. And of course, if you are an expert quilter and you already know how to do your quilting, that's great. Do it your way. I'm just showing this for people who are beginners, who have never quilted before. This makes it really easy. Use your walking foot if you have one for your machine. If you don't, just go very slow and make sure you're evenly feeding your quilt, both the bottom and the top of the quilt, through your machine. So you need to baste your 3 layers together, and then you can quilt in a grid pattern using this idea with the tape. Once you're done doing one direction with the tape, you can pull the tape off and reuse it to go the other direction. So you don't have to waste the tape. You can reuse it the second time to go the other direction across the quilt, so you end up with that nice grid. This video will be saved, so it's not just for live. I will be posting it for replay, so you don't need to worry about making notes right here. And if you have any questions, please let me know. And again, just give you another view of what it looks like with the stars all attached to the stripes. And I will see you later next week with something else. This is the end of the tutorial series for the table runners. So I hope you enjoyed it. Get the free pattern. It's there in the comments. And I will see you next week with something new.